Good morning, all. Welcome for another session. I think Dr. Aisha, you can share your screen.
Okay, are we starting? Good morning, everybody. Good morning, consultants. Good morning, fellow residents. Hello? Can you hear me, Dr. Paturi?
I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Yeah.
All right. Good morning, Ma. Good morning, consultants. Good morning, fellow residents. This morning, we're reviewing a journal. Sorry, it's not moving. Don't know why. Okay, sorry. The title of the journal is The Effect of a Reminder short message service on the uptake of glaucoma screening by first-degree relatives of glaucoma patients, a randomized controlled trial. The authors are Salihu DK, Adenuga OO, Wadi PD, and it's a publication that was in the Middle East African Journal of Ophthalmology 2019, October-December, volume 26. So the introduction was as follows. Glaucoma has been ranked as the second leading cause of blindness globally after cataract, with increasing significance due to an increasing aging population. It poses a greater health challenge than cataract as it leads to irreversible blindness. As of 2013, about 64.3 million people were estimated to be affected with the disease, with the burden projected to increase to about 76 million in 2020 and 111.8 million by 2040. Nigeria National Blindness and Visual Impairment Survey places the prevalence of blindness from primary open-angle glaucoma among individuals 40 years and above in Nigeria at 5.02%. The risk factors for the disease include a rise in IOP, increase in age, black race, first-degree relatives with primary open-angle glaucoma and vascular diseases. Compared to the general population, relatives of patients with primary open-angle glaucoma have a 2.9-fold increased tendency to develop the disease. Diagnostic tools for early detection of the disease are readily available in developed countries, unlike in developing countries, and furthermore, they are expensive where they exist. Mass screening for glaucoma is expensive and thus is not cost effective due to non-availability of reliable, affordable, and readily available tests. The current practice restricts screening into high-risk groups such as older individuals, those with a history of primary open-angle glaucoma in a close family member over the age of 40, and people of Black ethnicity. Early detection strategies suitable for resource-lean environments such as ours may aid in identifying some of these high-risk individuals and prevent blindness from the disease. The mobile phone short message service has been successfully used in medical practice to improve clinical attendance in various specialties, including ophthalmology, and also to improve compliance with treatments in glaucoma and pediatric cataract. It's used as a means to remind first-degree relatives of patients with primary open-angle glaucoma about their screening appointments may be a cost-effective strategy that would aid in early detection of the disease. This study was therefore designed with the primary aim of assessing the role of mobile SMS reminders on the uptake of glaucoma screening by first-degree relatives of patients with primary open-angle glaucoma in north-central Nigeria. And the secondary aim was to determine the response rate of this group of individuals to the free glaucoma screening initiative. So materials and methods. Now, this is a randomized controlled trial involving first-degree relatives of patients with primary open-angle glaucoma seen at the eye clinic of a tertiary hospital in Jos, north-central Nigeria. Ethical approval was obtained from the Ethical Review Committee of the hospital. And a written informed consent was obtained from all the study participants before enrollment in the study, and the tenets of Helsinki Declaration were adhered to. All consenting newly diagnosed and old patients with primary open-angle glaucoma seen at the eye clinic within the study period and their first-degree relatives were included in the study. Exclusion criteria included index patients less than 18 years of age, index patients with glaucoma other than primary open-angle glaucoma, first-degree relatives less than 30 years of age, accompanying first-degree relatives, and first-degree relatives without a functional phone or active phone line. For the purpose of this study, the first-degree relative was considered as a patient, sibling or offspring of a glaucoma patient aged greater than or equal to 30 years. A diagnosis of glaucoma was made using the International Society of Geographical and Epidemiological Ophthalmology classification, while a glaucoma suspect was defined as an individual with any of the following: IOP greater than or equal to 21 millimeters of mercury, a vertical cup disc ratio greater than or equal to 0.7, or a difference in the vertical cup disc ratio of the two eyes of greater than 0.2. The sample size of 200 was calculated for the study, with 100 questions in each group using the Fisher's formula and assuming a confidence interval of 95% with precision level set at 10%, setting a prevalence of uptake of 13.43% obtained from a similar study in Cameroon, and assuming a non-response rate of 10%. Patients with primary open-angle glaucoma presenting to the clinic were first allocated a study number and were administered a questionnaire. Information obtained include the patient's biodata and information on the patient's clinical condition, such as how long the patient had the diagnosis of glaucoma, when the diagnosis was made, and the treatment the patient was on. Information on the first-degree relatives including the name, the age, the sex, the relationship to the patient, residential address, and telephone number were also obtained. A phone call was then made by the index patient to his or her first-degree relative using the first author's phone, and the index patient first spoke to the first-degree relative and identified himself or herself. So that's a flow chart of what they did. The patients were enrolled and then they were randomized. The first-degree relatives were randomized. So some 100 received no SMS reminders, while 100 received SMS reminders, and then those that came in a presentation, and well, that's the flow chart there. So the first author was then introduced by this index patient to the first-degree relative, after which she passed across the following information. Your relative has been treated for is being treated for an eye disease called glaucoma, and the disease can be unnoticed until blindness ensues. Blindness from the disease is irreversible, being a relative of someone with the disease puts one at risk of developing glaucoma. Early detection and treatment can help prevent blindness from the disease, and kindly come to the eye clinic at the teaching hospital within 2 weeks from today, between Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. for free eye examination. The first-degree relative was asked to call the first author on arrival at the clinic and was informed that he or she would be exempted from the normal hospital protocols such as card registration and payment of consultation fees. The first-degree relatives with even numbers picked for them by the index patient fell into the test arm and received SMS reminders. And then those first-degree relatives who did not pick the call at the point of the recruitment after 2 attempts were excluded from the study. So for those first-degree relatives who fell into intervention group, a reminder SMS was sent to them at the first day of the week following the phone call invitation. The context of the SMS was that this is a reminder of your appointment for free glaucoma screening at the teaching hospital eye clinic between 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. from Monday to Friday within the next 1 week. A questionnaire was then administered and the following information was obtained: demographic data and details of the relevant ocular history, including if the participant has had an eye examination in the past. Ocular problems in the past, as well as the time of the study, were noted, and family history of blindness was documented. The first-degree relative then had a detailed ocular examination, which included visual acuity and refraction, slit lamp microscopy of the anterior segment, applanation tonometry, standard full threshold automated static perimetry, endoscopy, and a dilated fundus exam using a 78D lens. At the end of the 2-week screening period given for the last recruited first-degree relative, an additional 1 month was allowed to accommodate for possible late presenters. The phone calls were subsequently made by the first offer to those who did not show up for the screening to determine the reasons for their failure to turn up, and not more than 2 attempts were made 4 hours apart between the hours of 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. So collected data were entered into Microsoft Excel spreadsheets and analyzed with statistical with SPSS software version 20. And frequencies, means and standard deviations were determined, and all tests conducted were two-sided, and confidence interval was estimated at 95% level. The Pearson's chi-square test and Fisher's exact test where expected frequency of the sum was less than 5 were conducted, and significance was placed at a p-value less than 0.05. Quantitative variables were expressed at means and standard deviations. So for the results, 59 index primary open angle glaucoma patients were recruited over a period of 5 weeks. About 12 participants recruited per week, and these were made up of 38 males and 21 females, giving a male-female ratio of 1.8 to 1. The mean age of the index patient was 56.0 plus or minus 15.3 years, and each index patient gave a range of 1 to 5 first-degree relatives until 200 first-degree relatives were recruited, and these comprised of 117 males and 83 females, giving a male-female ratio of 1.4 to 1. The minimum of a minimum of 8 and a maximum of 16 index patients were recruited per week, and the mean number of first-degree relatives recruited per index patient was 3 plus or minus 1. So that was the first table, and it showed the responses of first-degree relatives to the invitation for screening. So those that did not present were 104, and those that presented were 96, which made 48.0%. So they had a response rate of 48%. 43 of the participants received 43% of the participants received SMS reminders, while 53% were in the control group. And the difference was not statistically significant with a p-value of 0.14. Only 4 first-degree relatives presented after the giving period for their screening, and had elapsed, and they were analyzed under those who presented for the screening. So their second table was age and sex distribution of first-degree relatives that presented for the screening program. So they grouped into intervals of 5. So the highest interval was 35 to 39, which made about 43.8% of the participants. So as I had mentioned, total participants that presented was 96%, and a chi-square value for the female patients was 3.5, p-value of 0.651, while for the chi-square value for patients that had received phone call and SMS was 3.5 with a p-value of 0.65, while those that received only the phone call had a chi-square value of 1.959 and a p-value of 0.767, and none of them was statistically significant. This is a table that showed the demographic data for the first-degree relatives that presented. So for the sex, p-value was 0.187, p-value of 0.68, and wasn't statistically significant. So what was statistically significant from this third table is the living conditions. So rural, semi-urban, and urban areas had a p-value of 0.01, which was significant. An educational level, which they had looked into, no education, primary, secondary, tertiary, had a p-value of 0.031%, which was statistically significant. People with higher educational levels, secondary and tertiary, presented more than people that had no formal education or primary level of education. And then occupation as relatives had normal eyes. Of the core. So table 4 showed the reasons for their non-attendance. 26, which is 25% of them, cited competing needs, for example, work, and 17 was cited lack of transport money. 11 said the hospital was too far, and 11 had time constraints. So for their discussion, the study revealed that sending an SMS reminder following a telephone invitation did not increase the uptake of glaucoma screening, as a majority of those who presented for screening were in the control group. This is contrary to the findings from previous studies, which demonstrated its effectiveness in increasing the uptake of cancer screening programs. We did not come across any other study in the literature that examined the role of a SMS reminder in glaucoma screening. Several studies have also overwhelmingly demonstrated the effectiveness of SMS reminders in lowering clinic non-attendance rates. The overall response rate in the present study, which was 48%, as they had stated, is higher than findings from similar studies in Tanzania and in India. And differences in the methods of invitations of those first-degree relatives for the screening may account for this difference. However, in contrast to our finding, another study in the United Kingdom that invited siblings of glaucoma patients for screening by an explanatory letter reported a very high response rate of 90%. Barriers to accessing eye care, some of which are peculiar to a developing country like ours, would explain this disparity. In addition, industrialized countries have higher levels of glaucoma awareness and more established eye care systems compared to developing countries. In the study by Vernon in the UK, only siblings of the glaucoma patients residing within a 15-mile radius of the hospital where the screening was conducted were invited for the study. Reducing travel distance and travel time will increase the uptake of a screening service. In the current study, all those who said they did not turn up for the screening because they forgot, which was 19.2%, did not receive SMS reminders. This proportion would, however, not have made any significant difference had they received the SMS reminder and turned up for the screening. We do not think that a reminder phone call would have made any difference either in our study cohort. Only a small proportion, which is just 6% of first-degree relatives in this study, had undergone a previous glaucoma screening, and this may be due to lack of awareness about the presence of the disease in the family, the hereditary nature of the disease, as well as the lack of knowledge of the irreversible effect of the disease on the site without treatment. So knowledge and awareness of glaucoma are generally poor in Africa. And this study had some limitations. So first of all, are the limitations that were associated with self-reported data, such as response bias, social desirability bias, and response shift bias. Second, the status of a first-degree relative was determined by the index patient. So there may therefore have been some degree of bias as to who benefited from the free eye examination and who did not. So in conclusion, a reminder of the SMS was not an tool for increasing in our environment. And existing barriers to accessing healthcare must be addressed before mobile phone technology can be effectively used in increasing the utilization of such screening services. Financial support and sponsorship, but there was none, and there was no conflict of interest that was declared. So that's the end of the study. So for my positive critique, I felt that the title was appropriate. I felt that the abstract was very well written and it conveyed the gist of the paper appropriately. I liked that their introduction started by explaining glaucoma and then bringing it to forefront its impact on sight and thus life globally and locally as well. I liked the projection of the future impacts of glaucoma that was made, and it was very commendable that the Nigerian National Blindness Study was reviewed, which is the gold standard for Nigeria, and their findings were used to interpret and bring the reality home. I liked the risk factors for the glaucoma. The risk factors for glaucoma disease were mentioned, which is very good. Again, bringing it to light its importance and highlighting those areas that need to be focused on. Mass screening for glaucoma was highlighted, including its pros and its cons, which was very commendable. The use of SMS as a tool in medical practice was introduced and references were made. The primary and secondary aim of the study were mentioned, which was also very commendable. So for the materials and methods, the type of the study was mentioned was a randomized control trial. The location of the study was also mentioned. The did stay was in the north central part of Nigeria, in a tertiary hospital. Ethical clearance and consent were obtained from the hospital ethical committee, and this was commendable. Tenets of this Helsinki were adhered to, which is what should be for all clinical studies. So we also mentioned the inclusion criteria and the exclusion criteria, which was good. The first degree relatives were clearly defined and who they meant by them. The ISGEO criteria was used to make the diagnosis and it was stated clearly. And the glaucoma suspect was defined and sample size was stated, as well as the calculations that they used and values they used to derive that. The process of randomization of the participants was clearly explained, which was commendable. The flowchart was good. It carried the whole gist of the matter at a glance. And the statistical software used and the methods of data analysis were also detailed, which was very commendable. Confidence intervals and significant p-values were mentioned. So in their results, the summary of the findings was good, and the tables that were put were significant and relayed a good understanding on an understandable interpretation of the findings at a glance, so it's easy to follow and comprehend. The figures and percentages were all added up, which was good, and keys were provided at the end of each table, so it was very good. The discussion was very well written. It was appropriate for the study and carried along the findings from the results. The references that were used were relevant to the study and they were current, and possible explanations were also provided for any disparities that they noted, which is very commendable. Limitations of their study were highlighted and possible sources of bias were also mentioned, which is good. So their conclusion was apt and appropriate, and financial support and sources of funding were declared. The lack of conflict of interest was also declared. For their references, they used the Vancouver references style, and it was consistent, which is very commendable. And the references were majorly current, based on when the study was published. Thank you. So for the negative critique, I found no reason to criticize the introduction, and it was well written. So the materials, for the materials and method, they did mention what kind of study it was, but they didn't tell us what the study period was. So we really don't know when the study was carried out. The only guide we have is when it was published, which is not enough. They also did not mention the study duration, so how many months it took, though within the discussion on the materials and method, they had mentioned that 2 weeks after, so, and then again another month for those that didn't present. So we'll give you a rough estimate of 6 weeks, but I think that they should have mentioned initially what the study period was and then the duration that the study was carried out. So this is a hospital-based study. And they did mention that I was in a tertiary hospital, but then there have been more than one tertiary hospital in that particular locality, so it would have been good to actually mention that it was whether the University of Just Teaching Hospital or whichever hospital that was used in. And because it's not a population-based study, I really don't know why they used the ISGEO classification to make a diagnosis of glaucoma. Since it's a tertiary hospital, expected that the ISGEO classification is not for clinical diagnosis, it's an epidemiological study, so it's for population-based studies, and I don't think it's appropriate as a diagnostics tool in a for clinical diagnosis, and particularly not in a tertiary hospital. So they administered questionnaires to the index primary open glaucoma patients, and I asked myself, what was the relevance of this? What was the relevance to this particular study? What was the relevance to this particular study? Because they didn't really have any reason to tell us that what kind of questionnaires and information were gotten from the index from the primary open glaucoma patients, as those patients were not the participants for the studies per se. Possible that is most likely because this study was part of a larger study, but I thought they should have stated that was part of a larger study, or they should have just left out those examinations and questionnaires and questions that were obtained from the primary open glaucoma patients, as it was not relevant to this particular study. And then in selecting the first degree relatives, was their location and place of residence considered? So as in, were they from that state, were they from that locality, were they from the same town or villages? Because I felt that this would have been a kind of like that study that they had reviewed in the US, where those that lived within 15 miles were recruited for the study. Because if they first of all ask, do we want only first relatives that live within the state or live within this town or in a nearby village, whereby accessibility would have been a problem, which would have accounted for the reason why some of them did not present. So it would have been good to mention if there was any such restrictions on those first relatives that were invited to participate. And then how was the level of the understanding assessed for this information that was conveyed? They did say that it was very commendable that the phone call was made by the first author's phone, and that the next patient was allowed to talk first and explain. But then even after the first author had informed the relative of why the aim behind the study and why the participant was being contacted, is there was any way to assess if they actually understood this information that was conveyed. And then I was curious as in, were all the participants from the same ethnicity? It's possible because they didn't really say anything about that. So if they were from the same ethnicity, it would have been good to mention so that we know that nothing was lost in translation. And if they were not from the same ethnicity, they would have been good if to know, especially because it was a phone conversation that needed information relayed, and the understanding of that information is key into the response that you will get from these participants. So were interpreters used, or was there a possibility that some of the information was lost in translation? And I was also curious whether these people, after they were talked to on the phone, did they give any verbal agreement as to see, because after they were told, come to the clinic in 2 weeks, did they say, okay, I would come, okay, I wouldn't come, or were they not given any opportunity to answer either way? And then I was curious, the first day of the week, the reminders were sent. So since each participant was told within 2 weeks, shouldn't the reminders be sent exactly 1 week after the patient was recruited? Because I felt if a patient is recruited on Monday, and then you send a reminder the next week, which is a Monday, so 1 week after the patient was recruited, okay, so that gives them 2 weeks to present. But if a participant was recruited on Friday, and then the next week, the first day of the next week is still a Monday, so it means that this patient actually had only 1 week reminder as against the patient that was recruited at the beginning of the week that had 2 weeks. So I thought that would have been maybe a possible source of bias, and that not each of those patients was given 2 weeks approximately. Maybe if each of them had received their reminders a week after they were recruited, it would have been more even. And then I was curious on how many days after the due date was the checkup phone call made, because they said after those 2 weeks had elapsed. So again, those participants are referred at the end of the week, had reminders at the beginning of next week. It means that the due date would have just been 1 week, or would have been 10 days. So it might have been uneven, as I had mentioned. And then both attempts to do for those reminders were done on the same day, 4 hours apart, which is good. I guess they were trying to make sure it was the same for all patients. But then if if they couldn't reach those people within that one day, it would have been for several reasons. They might have been traveling, they might have not have network, their phone might have died. So reminding them on the same day, I felt was maybe not so appropriate. Maybe it would have been a day apart or 2 days apart to eliminate such inconsistencies that may arise. And then and then I also was curious because they didn't mention at all when consent was taken from the first degree relatives. Because they did mention that consenting adults were recruited, but so I was curious, is it during the phone conversation, the initial phone conversation with the index patient and the participant or the first degree relative, was it a verbal consent over the phone, or was it after those patients came into the hospital that consent was taken, in which case those that did not come into the hospital at all did not give a consent to be used in this study? I don't know how they tackled that obstacle because it really wasn't safe. And based on the declaration of Helsinki, these consents should have been written. So the first degree relatives would have either sign or to print. That's the ideal way of obtaining a consent. And then the index patient, I don't think, has the authority to give a consent for his relative because it's the relative that is participant and not the primary open and glaucoma patient. I don't know how they went about that. So in the flow chart, biannual examinations for glaucoma suspects, that was what they ended up using. So I don't know if this is enough because the glaucoma suspect, as they listed the criteria, which was very good, the intraocular pressure, the cup disc ratio, the 0.2 degrees differences in the two eyes. So these were suspects, but these people are also people that are high risk based on the fact that their first degree relative has glaucoma, probably, and then they are black, which is another risk group or risk factor already. So based on this, I felt that biannual examination for glaucoma, particularly since they presenting to a tertiary hospital, might not necessarily be enough. And based on tenets of Helsinki, you should actually make sure that the most appropriate thing is done for such patients. So maybe a biannual examination is not so appropriate for everybody. In that case scenario, they have done more to actually make sure that these were either glaucoma patients or non-glaucoma patients. Again, why it would have been important to mention the hospital that was used or the kind of facilities that they have, because now central corneal thickness, OCT is available, and all those things are things that would better that can use to identify, to actually hone down those diagnoses of glaucoma, and not just the visual field assessment and intraocular pressure. So I felt that this was not enough, and biannual examination would have not been the best thing to do for the glaucoma suspects. So for their results, each index patient was given a range of 1 to 5 first degree relatives. So I felt that could this be a possible source of bias, because though they did mention that only 3 plus or minus 1 first degree relative was recruited by 96 index patients. So by 96 index patients. So if each participant had 3 patients that were recruited or 4 patients recruited, it means that it depends. If this was a family that was possibly more financially well-to-do or more educated, it means that all of his relatives might also be of a better financial standing or more educated, in the sense that they would understand the need to come into the hospital for those checkups, or it could be the reverse. Maybe this is a poor family and all of his relatives are equally poor, and their understanding, because based on their level of education, might not be so good, particularly since clinically, and since the p-value and clinical significance, it was significant for those that were businessmen, those that had tertiary level of education and secondary and tertiary level of education, so with the higher income participants. But then if each patient had an average of 3 recruited, that those recruited had a family that was better educated, or a family that was more wealthy, and I felt that would have been a possible source of bias. Maybe they would have just stuck to 1 relative per per index patient, or 2 relatives per index patient, to try and even this out. So and then the severity of glaucoma that the index patient has been another reason for compliance, because if in a family whereby the index patient that was being recruited had just early glaucoma or early glaucoma, and the rest of his relatives, they see him every day, so they know that he goes about his normal activities. I know most of them might not even realize that he has some form of visual impairment at all. They might think, but this man is doing all of his normal daily activities, he's not impaired in any way, so why is it necessary for me to actually go in for this checkup? They might not understand the severity, how bad the disease could get. This is different from somebody whose relative actually maybe has lost vision in one eye or has tunnel vision, so in which case advanced to severe glaucoma, they see like how debilitating this disease can be. So these relatives would be more pushed, should I say, sorry, would be more inclined to go to those hospitals for the checkups as against those whose first degree relatives has just an early disease. They also felt that study definitions for the address was missing. They said the patients were semi-rural, semi-urban, or urban. In their methodologies, they would have explained this further. Again, the location of the hospital. So is this hospital located in the rural area? Is it located in the urban area? Is it located in the semi-urban area? So I felt that if they had defined these terms more, and again, coupled with giving a better description of the urban population, would have helped to understand it better and possibly avoid the bias. We also said urban dwellers were found to be higher. So again, could this be because the hospital is located in an urban area, or because those urban dwellers have a better, higher income level, or those urban dwellers have a better educational level? So again, could have been a source of bias. So the occupation, they grouped the occupations that we've seen, those that were businessmen, those that were employed, those that were unemployed. They put students. So I felt that homemakers, so are homemakers employed or unemployed? Students, are they employed or unemployed? So I felt that the grouping was not very well thought out and not properly written, because homemakers are unemployed. Students are also unemployed. So it would have been better if we had grouped it based on middle income, low income, or low income, or found a way, because homemaker alone, or remove the homemakers completely, or removed the unemployed and just left it as students or homemakers. But this is a repetition, because homemakers could be unemployed, and students can be employed, or students can be unemployed as well. So I felt it wasn't very clear. We shouldn't have used those things that would have caused disparities. So also in their table 2 and table 3, they quoted chi-square values, which is, they did mention in methodologies that chi-square values and Fisher's exact test were going to be used to compare those categorical variables. However, the p-values that were obtained, they are also stated were gotten from the Fisher's exact test, which is commendable. But I don't think it should have quoted the chi-square values, since it is not appropriate for those tables, because some of those variables are 0, and in any table where you have a variable less than 5, Fisher's exact test would have been the ideal thing to use. So they should have quoted the Fisher's value and not the chi-square value, since the p-value that was calculated was obtained from the Fisher's test, and that was the appropriate thing to use in that table, since some of the variables were less than 5. I also felt that in that table 4, they had a group of patients that were examined elsewhere. So I was curious, so these examinations that were done elsewhere for those participants, was it before the phone call, or was it after the phone call? So in which case, these are people that already had a diagnosis of glaucoma, who already knew that they had or did not have glaucoma. So is it possible that those that did not present also fell into this? And if they had already had the diagnosis of glaucoma, then why were they recruited for the study? Because these are people that will be less inclined to actually come, or these are people that maybe did not believe the first diagnosis. And I was just curious, like, could this have been a source of variable which I've stated it in on their discussions or the results or something. Then their discussion, they stated there was one of the paragraphs, so I can't remember the paragraph, but what the statement there was that reducing travel distance and travel time will increase the uptake of glaucoma services, which is true, and it has been found found in several studies, but that was a statement that was written. It's a statement. So was it a statement of fact, or was it something that they had inferred from their study? It was a statement that of fact, and they should have referenced it because it's a very, very important statement and a quotation there. And then the types of bias were stated, which, as I mentioned, is commendable. But they said they said that there was response bias, social desirability bias, and response shift bias. But social desirability bias and response shift bias are all types of response bias, which I just said. Social desirability bias and response shift. Social desirability bias is bias that the participants can have in the sense that they want to give you an answer that they think you want to hear, while the response shift bias is pre and post test bias. I don't know how that would come into play in this study because it wasn't a pre and post test, so I don't think that was appropriate to use. But but then all of them are types of response bias. So, and I felt that there were many more sources of bias in that study, though it's a qualitative assay, and in qualitative studies, biases are expected. So I'm not querying the fact that they had bias, but I felt that they should have stated sources of bias more, especially since they were discussing it at the last paragraph. So sources of bias that they had from this study, I felt were sampling bias, because these first degree relatives were chosen from the participants, so they would have had omission bias and then inclusion bias as well, and then there was also procedural bias because the short time that was given for the response is kind of deeply. Procedural bias is when you're like filling a questionnaire, you're giving the patient a short time frame and saying hurry up, or giving them a short time to respond. So, and particularly since they had given an extra 1 month after their 2 weeks had elapsed, I don't know if it would have been appropriate to just give these patients 1 month to present. Would have sort of reduced the procedural bias that they got from that they the word to use that they had in the study. So relevance to UATH. So screening as well. A multidisciplinary approach is needed, and we need to reach out to our split population. So being African, being Black already is a risk factor for our patients. So I feel as if we should concentrate more, because already that's the risk factor. So in a more effective manner, this could look locally, just within our own department. It could be within our own hospital. It would be more flyers in the outpatient departments, posters on the walls, and things to bring it into the forefront of the patient's mind. Even those that did not present for poor vision would see it, and they could be ambassadors and inform people around them as well. And also jingles in TV in our outpatient clinic. We mentioned this a while ago in one of the presentations where we talked about how to overcome barriers, and just having a small jingle in that TV that's located in our outpatient clinic that would run during the clinic hours can be a way of increasing awareness to patients. And then targeting the family physicians in their OPD, and then those of them that come for rotations in our clinic, bringing it to the forefront, the severity, so that in their own GOPDs and during their own other postings, they can help us increase awareness amongst those patients and refer those above the age of 40, which really, as I said, the age group and already being Black is a risk factor. So encourage these patients to come to the to the eye clinic for screening activities. And also screening by word of mouth may not be enough. So we need to do more And then several barriers to the uptake of services still need to be tackled, from patient factors and patient-related factors like fear, cost, and lack of awareness, hospital factors like distance, location, bureaucracy in the hospital, lack of expertise, infrastructure, and personnel training, economic factors like money and educational levels, government factors like infrastructure, road networks, transport networks, equipment, and training services. In conclusion, I felt it was a very well written article with so much impact and relevance to our community. Thank you for listening. Hello?
Oh, thank you. We can hear you, Dr. Aisha.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me get to the panelists.
Okay. Dr. Kalambi, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, well done. That was very good. I want to commend you. You kept to time, and it was well delivered. I find your critique very robust. So I agree with you. A lot of bias that could have crept in, especially in the area of the recruitment of the first degree relative. They may be living far away from jobs. And I mean, if I take myself as an or some are in Lagos, but they can't possibly start coming to this side to have an eye check. So I think your robust for your I think we give room to the attendees to have their comments and questions, and then we now take a comment from the consultant.
Dr. Ayeni, good morning. Yes. Please, can
morning,
you, okay. I was just going to say maybe you should call them one by one, but I've seen Dr. Ejeba has raised his hand, so.
Yes, and so if anybody has a question or comment, you can raise your hand or you type it and send. Any of them would be. Okay, so if there are no comments or questions from the residents, can we listen to the consultant?
Okay, good morning, the department.
Good morning, Prof.
Thank you so much. Dr. Kalambi, it's a good review. So well done. I have some observation which I want to make. I hope people are hearing me.
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Okay. Let's start from the abstract. the purpose, that purpose could be better written. Could be better written. Though I may want to give the viewer or the authors some level of this thing. Probably those who review the article, probably they specifically ask author to do certain things and then they are satisfied with what they have done, but notwithstanding, I would have loved that purpose to be modified because it looked too lengthy. Then I also have loved not to have not central as part of that statement. At best, just should be written there, not central, because the scope of the study, it will be difficult to generalize it on not sample size and the eventual number of the too small for that generalization to hold. And then it just one hospital-based study. If we want to generalize as include not center, maybe 3 places or more to have been reflected at the study center. It should have been maybe multi-center based study. Then if we look at those not center in those in the abstract, it's better that not center removed from. Then under result, the first sentence under that result, I would have loved it removed because it looked like a conclusion. The first sentence under result, I would have loved that it is removed. It looked like a conclusion. Then the next sentence then they now quoted the percentage 43 versus 53. Though the difference was not statistically significant, that though the difference was not statistically significant, is not necessary. They will have just
sorry to interrupt you, please. Can you start again? You said the first sentence.
The first sentence under result.
Yes, which is what?
I mean, which is sending a reminder SMS following a telephone invitation had no effect on the uptake of glaucoma screening.
Am I looking at the wrong paper?
I'm still on the abstract.
Oh, on the abstract, I see.
I'm still on the abstract.
Okay, I see. Okay.
Yes, that sentence to be removed. It looked like a conclusion. Can I continue?
Yes, please.
Okay. Then the modification for the next sentence to that one that this will be deleted. I want to believe that people have taken note of that. That under conclusion, still on abstract, that no sentence will not be there. Okay, the address of the first author, I want to be corrected to Sichanrai. Is it not to Sichanrai Hospital? Is it foundation? The address of the first author.
It's to Sichanrai Foundation Hospital.
It's foundation.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then I notice what I can term as not using words appropriately or not picking very relevant, the use of words, some words I would have preferred other words that are substituted for them. Like the last, under introduction, page 197, there was a place where they were quoting another author, it's a reference, and people of black ethnicity, I would have preferred people of black race or something like that, rather than use ethnicity. So it's not the author's, I think that error is not from the authors, it's from the paper they are quoting. Then under material methods, I noticed that many researchers, when they are reporting their Earth Research Ethics Committee, they just use the word Ethical Review Committee. In Nigeria, apart from the National Earth Research Ethics body, all the Research Ethics Committee across various institutions in Nigeria, they are called a Research Ethics Committee, and that was to be used. Eh?
I didn't hear that.
You know the name of Earth Research Ethics Committee most of the time is wrongly used, is wrongly spelled.
Okay.
So apart from the national body, all other Research Ethics Committee across the country, it is named Earth Research Ethics Committee.
Okay.
Then there was a statement. A written informed consent was obtained from all the study participants. I am very happy that you are able to pick that, because when we went through the methodology, I don't want to agree with that statement. I don't want to agree with that statement, because some or many of those participants, they were not actually, they were unable to come to be interviewed by the researcher. Then those that came, when the researcher was documenting what they did for them on arrival in the hospital, there was no mention of taking written informed consent. So that statement should be modified. Then I was just curious, why excluding, just being curious, why excluding people less than 30 years? Is it to get a good yield, since it is taken that glaucoma is more common among people 35 years and above? I don't know. All these juvenile onset and some other glaucoma, which is also primary open angle glaucoma, they will have lost opportunity of recruiting them into the study. Then the text message in fighting the third degree relations of patient with primary open glaucoma. They didn't tell us which language are all the people recruited. Are they speaking English? Do they understand English? So they should have let us know whether they include other languages, or the text message was in the language understood by the participants. Then another poor use of the word under that material method is where they wrote that the person who tossed the coin, I don't expect them to use the word person. It's supposed to either be the researcher or the research assistant that tossed the coin, not the person, because this is a research work. Whoever is the person has changed the name to either research assistant or researcher. Then I also find fault with the period they had the participant to come between 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. You know, and they didn't indicate that. I expect some level of flexibility because some participants may not be able to make that period 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. maybe because of schedule of duty or what other reason that the participant may want to. I even expect them to maybe to include something like Saturday, even Sunday, so that they give flexibility to maybe those people that may be busy during the weekdays. Then, though they didn't mention that one, I also want to, they later wrote that all the patients, they claim that they received the text message, because initially when I was going through the paper, it was like, do they take note of the fact that some text messages may not be delivered, but they didn't, they say all the people that didn't eventually turn up, they claim that they received the text message. When we give it to them, but I know that not all text messages are delivered by all these service providers in Nigeria. Then to Dr. Kalambi, they say that phone call was subsequently made by the first author to those who did not show up for screening to determine the reason for. No, that is not what I do. The question is, the first author allow the use of his or her phone to make contact to those prospective first degree relation. Why do you think, that is the first question for you, why do you think that is very important, and what are the maybe challenge that can be associated, because some people may not even pick the number, they don't know the. So I want you to comment on that. Why do you think that the use of the phone of the first author in calling those primary relative is, what are the merit or demerit of that? The study period, I'm very happy that you have commented on the study period, which is quite okay. I also noticed that they didn't do matching, age and sex matching, but the people that eventually turned out, well, during the, because I look at their table, they didn't tell us that they do age and sex matching, but it turned out for the researcher that they think naturally end up doing matching. You are getting me, because of the number of people that turn out. I think you are following what I'm saying, Dr. Kalambe.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Because you know, in some study they will go out to say that they match age and gender, but in their own case they didn't do that. In fact, if I don't know whether I'm right, it even appeared from this thing that the thing was skewed towards male gender. That was the original plan, but it turned out that most people that came, they balanced out or something like that. Then another question for you, Dr. Kalambe. If you are to replicate this study, what will you ensure? What are the gaps you are likely to fill as soon as you want to replicate this kind of study? Then let's go to the discussion. Some people, when they want to start their discussion, they will do a kind of summarize their research objective. That would be the first sentence. The way they did they did their own is another way of doing it. But some people will prefer to have a kind of summary. What the study is all about, what they want to achieve. Why are they even putting up that study at the first sentence in their discussion? So I quite appreciate the flow chart, which is a good summary of what they have done. I think you have reviewed the table 3. Maybe I should not bother you again because I have questions for you before. Then let's go straight to the. Oh, okay, maybe another question. You may want to explain to us the conflict, what you understand by conflict of interest. Do you think is necessary in this paper? If you think it's necessary in this paper, why? If you disagree that it's not be there, why? Okay, let's go to references. Maybe I will disagree with you that the references are very consistent. If it just, the first reference, you will see that there are 5, the first 5 authors were mentioned.
6.
Why the rest that have more than 6 authors is only 6 authors that were listed.
So even in the first one, 6 are listed.
The first 6 reference.
6 are listed.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The first 5 authors, they not the first 5 authors were mentioned, whereas others that
it's
have
6.
more than 6 authors.
6.
6 is consistent.
The first 6 authors were listed.
It's 6 authors were listed on reference 1. Resnikov, Pascolini, Etiale, Koku, Para, and Pockrell.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. I think that one is. Then there is one where I'm coming. Okay, that's reference 3. Is it just 1 page? Because I've not seen that paper. I've not checked that paper in recent time. Is it just 1 page? Because
it's an online publication. So online publications usually just have the first page.
Okay. Then reference 18. There's no author.
It's a book. What books usually do, you write the publishers, and I think that's Elsevier Sanders, unless you want to quote a particular chapter, which they didn't.
Info at that, if it's a book with many authors, I expect them to include the name of the author.
Most times they just ask for publishers. It depends on the referencing.
And the name of the editor is incomplete.
Yeah, so it depends on the referencing thing they're doing for books. Most people actually, you're right, they get they don't reference books properly. Sometimes you're even required to put the page.
Okay, reference number 30. The second author. Is it a compound name? If it is not a compound name, so it's not properly cited. Reference number 30, the second name.
Yeah, I can see even the 4th name.
3rd and 4th and 5th. Sorry.
Yeah, the 4th, the 2nd and 4th author. Okay, maybe you answered some of the queries.
Okay. Thank you for your observations and comments too. Any clarification? So the first question was, sorry, should I wait for everybody's question or should I go ahead?
Hello?
Should I go ahead or should I wait for everybody's question?
Try to answer them.
Okay, so the first question was that you wanted to know the demerits and merits of the first author allowing her phone to be used. So I think it was a good thing that she actually allowed her phone to be used. First of all, she buying the credits that would have been because she would if she used the first degree relative's phone, then it would have meant that the first degree relative would have borne the cost of purchasing the credits that would have been used or the airtime that could have been used, and also that or she would have been the one to buy airtime for that particular patient's phone to be used. So the fact that her phone was used meant that at least she bore the cost of the phone call. And also, it might be that the index patient that was recruited does not even have a full a functional phone that could have been used at that time. So the fact that her own phone was used is a good thing in that regard. But as you had already rightly mentioned, the demerit of that is also that people might not necessarily answer numbers that they don't know at that particular time, regardless of how many times you called. But I think that she tried to overcome that by, if the patient did not answer, they tried a different relative, and that's why she had a range of 1 to 5 for participants. And then your second question said, if you're to replicate the study, what are the gaps that you'd likely to fill, that would have been likely to fill? I think the first gap would have been in the recruitment. Most of my gaps would have been in the recruitment because I had a lot of issues with the recruitment that went on. First of all, the location of those first degree relatives would have been the forefront of my mind, would have definitely been people that lived around the hospital, in which case it eliminates the bias that would have presented. So I would have asked for only the first degree relatives that live within an area that is easily accessible. And during those phone calls, would have made sure to ask them whether coming would have been difficult for them or not. And also the duration, that 2 weeks is short, as you said. So particularly since she extended the period for a month, that period should have been included. So they have been told them to come within a month after they had been recruited. Giving them more leeway to plan their schedules and work around it. And also, as you rightly mentioned, including weekends and weekdays and off office hours. So actually during the phone call, asking those patients what time would be convenient for them to come would have been a way to increase the response rate that we'd have gotten from that. And also restricting the number of relatives that each participant, each of the index patients recruit. Because as I mentioned, that part of my critique, in a family that is very well educated and very well to do, with higher incomes and businesses that they personally own, those people would have been easier for those people to come as against people that were sole business owners or poor income levels. Those people would have found it very difficult, particularly between the hours of 9 to 1, to leave their places of work to come, and that would have been a source of bias. Those people that are employed by someone else can also find it very difficult to come, particularly within that short period of time and within those particular hours, because the employer might not necessarily be generous enough to allow them those time. So all of those things I would have tried to sort out. So people would have been given more flexibility as duration and time to come. And also some of those this study would have also been well, community based would have been better, as you said, because you would have been able to generalize it more. But then it now defeats the purpose, because the study is to see how they would respond to SMSs. So it's a good thing that the tertiary hospital was used, but I would have made more effort into examining those patients. Another source of bias I forgot to mention was they didn't really tell us who bore the cost of investigations. They did say that the cost of cards and consultations were waived, but these patients, they have to pay for the fractions, the visual field assessment, the tonometries that they had done, or was it waived for them? And if it was, they should have mentioned it. So that's something that I would have done in the study, because especially during the phone call conversations, particularly telling those patients that they will not have to pay for these investigations, would have encouraged more of them to turn up. And also increasing the sample size, because only 96 index patients for the glaucoma, 96 index patients whose relatives were contacted. So it would have been more robust if the sample size was larger, particularly glaucoma being so common. I'm sure they would have had a lot more than 96 patients. So maybe making it bigger and larger would have made it more robust and easier to generalize the findings from those studies. Those are some of the gaps. And then those glaucoma suspects, as I had mentioned earlier, more effort should have been put. Still is not part of the study, but at least bearing the hostility declaration, if you need to do more, you need to do no harm to such patients, and you need to give your maximum effort, particularly to diseases that can be diagnosed and can be sorted out. So more effort to actually group those patients. You can't have glaucoma suspects in a tertiary hospital, to my way of thinking. It's more effort into actually ascertaining whether they have glaucoma or they don't have glaucoma, and just not leaving them as just suspects and then giving 6-month appointment. I don't think is appropriate. So that's something that I would have to then the biases, obviously, I mentioned some of them, the procedural bias, the recruitment bias, as I mentioned, the response bias. Those things would have eliminated them more or discussed them more. I think then to explain the conflict of interest. So do I think it's necessary in this paper? No, I don't think it's necessary for this paper, because my own understanding of conflict of interest that if the participant has some personal gain from the study, in making money from it in any way, or promoting any investigation or drug or equipment in any way, and none of this came into play in this particular study. So there was no possible source of a conflict of interest. So it would have been, it wasn't really necessary to declare a conflict of interest. But I think some journals will insist that you do declare it either way. Probably that was why it was included there. But for the purpose of this particular journal, it doesn't really come into place. So it's not really necessary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Kalambe. Maybe I start with the conflict of interest. Conflict of interest may not necessarily be cash alone. Then I forgot to mention that though the author, they were able to tell us that they just want to test whether SMS is useful. But I was just wondering that does it mean that nobody among those patients, all the people that follow them, they are not their first degree relative, because I expect it to appear in their exclusion criteria that those that follow the patients. Is there?
Yes, sir. They mentioned that not the patients that escorted them were not included.
And they exclude them.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then I don't know whether I can do general comments now, because I noticed that not all the residents are here. But I saw some other names that may not necessarily, maybe they are using other people's PC, any fight, Fado, iPad, journal review. I saw some names under participants. I don't know whether some of our residents are the one using all those names, because it's good to actually know who and who are actually present in this session, so that we know whether people are participating or not. So it's very important. And then we don't know how long this lockdown will be. So though it's like because government cannot continue to lock everything down, because if there's no money to pay anybody, government is not making any money. Everywhere there's no money. I think I want to tell everybody to be thinking of when to return back to work. That's what I pray that we will either we are going to get a protective gear or something like that, because by the time government cannot pay us any longer, I don't think we will be able to stay at home. So I'm just thinking, not necessarily that I have information from any government or anywhere. So that's just it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Prof. Prof took 30 minutes to make comments. So let's listen to Dr. Chiari, please, so that I will round up this session. It's been a long day.
It's been a long morning. Thank you. Good morning once again, everybody. Dr. Aisha, thank you very much for your choice of paper and also for the thorough critique. We understand that FDR is one of the low-hanging fruits, first-degree relatives in the, trying to control glaucoma blindness. So it is anything that will help us to improve the uptake of glaucoma screening or glaucoma examination by FDRs is very important. I would like to also commend the authors, for this. And even though everybody has thoroughly critiqued it, which is valid critique, but we were able to do that because they gave us a very good method. They showed the methodology. So we were able to see where all the problems were and the biases were. So I think it was a good paper that was written, not good in terms of content and pattern, but they told us exactly what they did. There was someone that asked a question. I don't know if you've answered the Q&As, but what I also have down here is they used ISGEO criteria for diagnosis of glaucoma in hospital patients. Do you think that is correct? What does the ISGEO say? It says classification. It does not say diagnosis. It says classification.
I felt it was appropriate because it's for ISGEO is for epidemiological studies, so community population-based studies. So particularly, you can't use it to make a diagnosis, especially not in a tertiary center, which they mentioned.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I hope this is highlighted. Everybody has taken a note of that. Away from wherever they're coming, and then you're looking for a cup-disc ratio of 0.7 before you make a diagnosis of glaucoma. Yeah. So it's very important. And even the suspect, they included IOP of 21. So now you're already cutting off. So diagnosis of glaucoma, especially for screening in a tertiary hospital, should be more robust than this. So that's one this thing. You've already dissected yourself and Prof on recruitment. You have already done that. How was it ascertained? There's a lot of bias in how FDRs were recruited. But my question even is really, who are the participants of this study? Because they now said they obtained consent from the index patient, and then they now called the FDRs, and then they now reported about the FDRs. Who are the participants? So that is just a rhetoric question for us to think about. Then there's one thing I'm always concerned about. Every time I read papers for review or even dissertations, I see people writing consenting adults. You also mentioned that. Can all of you just do a quick Google? What does consenting adults mean? Okay, so it's different from saying consenting patients. Even consenting patients, I don't really like the way it's said. Patients with informed consent, fine. But what 10 dictionaries here now that have told me what consenting adults are? All of you can check that. That's a discussion for another day. Then There's well, I don't want to go into consent. That's Professor Ayani's area of, I don't know, expertise, right? But let's now that we're talking about consent, I think we need to know the different types of consent that can be obtained in patients, especially in hospitals. So I'd like you all to also go and find out the different types of consent. I don't forget when I ask people to do something, so I might ask you next time. Because as we said, it's a long morning. We're not going to start looking at that. So consenting adults and consent, the different types of consent you obtain. We did not talk about statistics. I want you to have a look. Tell me, what is Fisher test? What is chi-squared test? What is the difference between the two? When do you choose which one to do? That's just very basic statistics. I want you to answer that now. Okay, I mentioned about exemption. You also mentioned about exemption of hospital fees, consultation, which is quite good. It's quite commendable, actually, because when talking with some of the doctors, I know that it is a big thing to even try to screen first-degree relatives, you know, because of hospital fees. Some are 2,000 naira. How can you just say somebody that accompanied someone to come and say, pay 2,000 naira? You know, so it's a good thing. But as you also rightly mentioned, there are so many other costs that have not been offset. Even transport cost is a thing, you know. And then, as Dr. Aini said, all the way from somewhere, how can they come? So if we're going to design such a study, for example, I think we have to consider location and also multi-center. Then the other thing also is how many people actually disclose their illness. Yesterday, there was a whole discussion on that, you know, disclosure, lying, and what's the other one? Keeping information, withholding information,
Non-disclosure.
you know. So how many? Non-disclosure, yeah. So how many? Lying.
Lying, outright lying. Then
Yes, outright lying.
Then
deception.
And then non-disclosure.
Yes. So we know that glaucoma, especially glaucoma patients, and especially some people, they will not even tell anybody. So that the choice of who they even phoned is, you know, questionable, because they have to be careful on who they choose to call. And it's not like go home and discuss. It's right there, call the person, you know. So it's, we've talked about that. Recruitment is very difficult, but it's somewhere we can always start on. Then the barriers. I just have some very interesting ABCDEFG. When you're classifying barriers, is an interesting classification that I found. Access, B, bad service, and bad service does not mean that, but you did mention some problems with the hospital, you know, difficulties in the hospital. It doesn't mean that the diagnosis or the treatment or whatever is bad, but, you know, issues around the service. Then costs, C, D, distance, E, escorts, F, fear, G, gender, mostly women, you know, left behind on such things. So I found that quite interesting. And thank you very much, Professor Aini, for that extensive critique. I think it has been, it shows a lot of loopholes in the paper. So it's called an RCT, randomized trial. Yeah, did they call it a randomized control trial? Yes. So yeah. So as Prof has punctured a lot of holes in that, because an RCT is not just about randomization, the way they did it, pick a coin and toss a coin and stuff like that. No, there are a lot of other things to be considered in a randomized trial, and a lot of biases that are supposed to be removed, but a lot of these were not actually considered. So it is, and then most randomized control trials are actually registered. You know, you register your protocol before you even start. So unless you get registered, you're not deemed to really have a randomized control trial. So I don't see any registration on that. There's a paper that they call trials, which is an example of where protocols of RCTs are registered and a registered number is given. So anywhere in the world, you can check it up and see that this is actually an RCT. An RCT is for intervention, which this is rightly so. Anyway, so Prof has already asked you to tell us how you might improve on this, which is also what I wanted to, so it's fine. And we might also want to see how we can pick our own FDRs. So it may not have to be this way, but I think you have to devise a plan on how we can pick our own FDRs in our hospitals, in our practice, okay? So that is an assignment for you to do. And at a future date, sometime you might present it and we can see if we can make a project out of this. Yeah, so thank you very much. It's been a very long morning, but we would really like to have a feedback from participants, and we set up a poll to do this. It's very easy. I think if you have your laptop, you might be able to see. Dr. Mustafa, are you going to run the poll?
Okay, yes. Let me start.
Okay. So,
we have our first poll now.
It's 9 questions, but it won't take us more than 10 minutes. Please.
Yeah, the first 6 will come as a group, while the other 3 will come as individual polls.
Okay. So can you all see the poll? If you can't, please raise up your hand so that we will know. And if you can, you just answer. So you vote. Are you able to vote?
Can we see the?
Yes, it's clear.
All right. Okay, the poll has ended.
No, we have to do it again.
Okay.
I don't think only 3 of 12 people have voted.
Okay.
It's still running. It hasn't ended. It's still running.
Yeah.
Hello, good morning. Sorry, I was unable to solve.
I don't know that you are around.
Dr. Ume?
Okay, good morning. I was unable to submit. That was why I raised my hand.
Okay.
Can you do that now?
Yes, I think I can now.
That was on Sunday, and I asked him that.
So listen, I'm allowing everybody to talk. So if you want to talk, just press your unmute yourself.
He's not around now. Yeah, I should tell him to talk. Okay, so let me call him.
Okay. We have like 11 people have voted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mine the 12.
Okay.
Okay, so what do you make out of this?
So should we end the polling?
Yeah, I think you can. I think 11 out of 12. I don't know who is not voting. Maybe it's me, but no, probably not. Okay.
Can we see the results?
Can we all see the results?
Yes.
Okay. So are the meetings helpful? We have 91% saying yes, they are. Sometimes, if you have a sometimes, if you want to make a comment, please you add it to the chat box. I know the results are anonymous. The chat box might not be, but it would be useful to know. What else do you think we could do? So about half said this is fine. Or some say have more regular clinical discussion meetings. Some say give personal updates on work and home. Okay, why I put this is, because we're not seeing each other. We're away from, this. So do we want to update ourselves? It's good to just know what everyone is up to and how you're keeping and coping. Then are the meetings fair on your data usage? 73% said yes, 27% said no. So how should we address that? Do you want to do, I don't know. So usually I said, okay, why don't you consider your transport money as a substitute for your data money? I don't know. Maybe you can change your transport money since you're not spending much on transport now, use it for data. And then are you able to stay attentive and engaged during the meeting? 73% yes. 27% sometimes. Would like to know why, but nobody said no. So I guess engagement is quite high. Is your participation at the Q&A comment section satisfactory to you? 91% said yes, some said no. And the reason why it is no is that they would like to see the questions as well, not just the panelists. So I think that is something that we can do something about. We'll make the questions open, visible to everyone.
Yeah, we can make them visible.
Yeah, I think that's an oversight. So we'll make the questions visible to everyone. How else can we use this time more effectively? This is fine. Then some said, I will add response to chat box, but I haven't seen any further response. So, Prof. Fado that you are seeing there is Dr. Wanko. He said to tell you. Okay. Can we do the next? Are we okay? Are there any comments? Everyone is allowed to talk, but let's take the next one. The next group of 3. Then we'll now discuss if anybody has additional comments. So please, let's vote on these ones. Is the connectivity of the webinar satisfactory? So that has to do with your data as well as, what you're using. I can stop sharing your screen.
I should stop sharing my screen.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, so the result for the first one is the connectivity of the webinar satisfactory. 89% said yes, 1% said no. Okay, we'll discuss that. Next one, next. Next question. Next question. Is the timing of the webinar convenient? Okay, so 100% of those that voted said yes. So it's great. We'll keep to the time. The next question is duration of the webinar 1 hour sufficient for topics covered? We usually go over 1 hour actually. I don't know what your comment you make, Prof and Dr. Aini. I know we mentioned the last time it took almost 2 hours plus, but when we spill over, maybe comments will require comments to hear if that's fine.
If we want to limit ourselves to 1 hour, we may need to add the presenter to maybe present within 25 minutes or 30 minutes, so that the remaining 30 minutes we use it for comment, while the moderator will just end the discussion maybe 1 hour on the dot. If we want it that way, it's an option.
Well, that depends on the house. For us, it's for iFocus is fine. You know, we can do up to 2 hours, but it depends on the house. I know that even on face-to-face discussion, it's usually over 1 hour.
Okay.
Usually, you know, the one you do in the hospital, it's always often more than 1 hour. So if it's fine, it's fine. But maybe we try to just make it a bit less than 2 hours. You know, maybe 1.5 hours.
Okay. Then the moderator has to be strict.
Strict on time.
I will suggest, ma. I will suggest that we leave it as at 45 minutes for the presentation, and then we work. Since usually we spill over, really, we can say 30 minutes for discussion. So even if you are making a discussion, a contribution, you can make it as snappy as possible. So let's say 1 hour 15 minutes or thereabout.
Or 1 hour 30 minutes at maximum. Okay.
Maximum.
Okay. Oh, really? Okay. Okay. So any comments on the poll? Prof, what do you say? Based on responses. The responses. Some people.
It's
great. Okay.
It's great because I have to leave the cat. Let the cat out of the bag. Virtually all what I pick came to be the highest for every item. Hello?
Yes.
All the options I pick happen to be among the among the highest for each item.
Okay.
And so, and then the majority will have their way, while minority will have their say.
Okay. All right then. So
Democracy.
that means democracy. That means we just carry on as we are. We'll make sure that the questions are open to everybody can view the questions, and then the timing is fine. The time of the day is fine. We can carry on with the journal review clinical meetings as we have been, and then those that have problems with their network should try and see how best they can manage that, because that's in the minority. The majority feel they're fine.
Please, is Afam, Nwange, Agwadu, are they with us? Fado has identified himself, but I don't want to be calling other something. But Afam, Nwange, Agwadu, John Sam.
Sir Nwange is present.
And fight.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. What about the other